Hello, everybody, and welcome to Box Seat Banter. I'm your host, Billy Ballas, and broadcasting today from the Roberto Clemente Bridge in Pittsburgh. Joining me today is Joey from Sarcastic Baseball. That's at Sarcastic BASEB1. He is a baseball fan with a love for analyzing the game using math, science, and sarcasm. And Joey, today we are talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates as we enter the National League Central. Now, you have born and raised in Southern California, but a big baseball fan all your life. Why don't you tell everyone, how you have such knowledge of the Pirates, because that's why you're here today, to share that knowledge with the Pirates. So first of all, welcome to the show. And why don't you share that with us?
Hey, Billy, thanks for having me. I've never thought following one team was enough. The Pirates are one of a handful of teams I've followed. I think for many of the people in our generation, that started in the early 90s when they fielded those good teams with Barry Bonds and many other great players. I think, if you fast forward, I've had a few other good times with the Pirates. I got to play on a little league team not too much later after that. My dad was the coach. All my friends were on the team. A lot of great memories from wearing that Bucks jersey. A bit later, I had a friend in the 2000s that's from the Pittsburgh area, and we watched a lot of games together. Got to see them a few times at the West Coast stadiums, and of course they had that good run that we'll get to discussing in recent history that sort of just pulls you in and makes you an even bigger fan. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking.
Yeah, absolutely. We are happy to have you. Now, the Pirates, going way back, they were established in Pittsburgh in 1881. They were the Pittsburgh Allegheny as a founding member of the American Association. They became the first team to switch from that American Association to the National League in 1887. And they became, in 2013, the seventh Major League Baseball team to record 10,000 wins. I know in the past several years, past quarter century, we remember, a lot of the futility of the Pirates, but, they have had a great history, and as evidenced by, that huge amount of wins that they have. They played in Three Rivers Stadium from 1970 to 2000. And coincidentally, Three Rivers Stadium, Joey, do you have any guesses on when it opened up in 1970?
When? What time of year? What do you mean?
Yeah, a date. First game played at Three Rivers Stadium.
Oh, I don't know this. No, tell me.
It's actually July 16th. 1970, and as we are broadcasting right now, recording this on July 16th. So 50 years to the day is when Three Rivers Stadium opened up. Another thing about Three Rivers Stadium, it hosted the first night game in World Series history. That was October 13th, 1971. And Three Rivers Stadium, for, as great of baseball as it has seen, it is probably not one of the top stadiums, not one of the top venues in baseball. It was one of those multi-purpose stadiums that was popular in the 70s. Had AstroTurf, and it was they played their last game there in 2000. And then the Pirates moved into beautiful PNC Park in 2001. And that is regarded as, one of the top stadiums in baseball. Joe, it's just got a great view of the rivers, of, Roberto Clemente Bridge, of the Pittsburgh skyline. Do you have any thoughts on the stadium?
No, I mean, those are all great thoughts. I'm just sad to say that I've not been in person yet. I'm really looking forward to it, but this isn't going to be the year.
Yeah, unfortunately not this year. But yeah, it is on my short list of, stadiums that I would want to go to. Obviously I would have loved to go to all 30. I've seen games at 8. I've been to 2 others, and not for games, but I would love to go to all 30. And PNC Park is high on the list of stadiums I have not been to. In the past quarter century, the Pirates have not won a division title at all. They did win, as you mentioned, those teams with Bonds and Van Slyke. I think Andy Van Slyke was on those teams. They won 3 straight division titles in 90, 91, and 92. And in the playoffs in 92, it was that famous game against the Braves, where the Braves actually scored 3 runs in the bottom of the 9th in Game 7, including 2 on that base hit to left when Bonds' throw was late, and the Braves walked him off.
It was a little out of line too.
Yeah, and so after that, the Pirates struggled. They did win the wild card in 2013, 14, and 15. They have not had any appearances in the NLCS. So obviously they have not won a World Series in that span. They do have 5 total World Series victories, going back to 1909, 1925, 1960, when Bill Mazeroski famously ended the World Series on a walk-off home run against the Yankees, and then 1971 and 1979. So, Joey, they do have quite a rich history.
Definitely they do. Unfortunately, most of it's from before my lifetime.
Yep. Yes. We will now get into the past quarter century, but yeah, they do have several accomplishments to be proud of, but yes, unfortunately not so much in the past quarter century. Time to get into one of my favorite segments of the show, our trivia question. Last week, we talked about the Marlins, and to refresh everyone's memory, the question was, who were the 2 World Series MVP winners for the Marlins? They won the World Series in 1997 and in 2003. Who were the 2 players to win the World Series MVPs? Now, Joey, I know you were not here with us last week. Do you have any recollection of that? I'll offer that to you before I share the answer.
I do. I knew one of them, but I had seen your answers already by the time I.
So it was 2003, the one that you knew?
Yeah, definitely.
And that Josh was last week. Yes, Terry guessed correctly. Josh Beckett, although I don't think that was a guess. I believe he knew that one. 2003 was Josh Beckett. And 97, I think his guess last week was Craig Counsell. It was a good guess. He did score that winning run in the bottom of the 9th.
Right, that's huge, yeah.
Or bottom of the 11th, to win the World Series. He was not the correct answer, though. It was actually Livan Hernandez in 1997. So it kind of came full circle in the NL East, since he was the answer to the first trivia question in the Nationals podcast. So Livan Hernandez in 97, Josh Beckett in 03. Now, getting to the Pirates. In the past quarter century, what player has had the most opening day starts for the Pirates, and at what position? So it's not necessarily the opening day pitcher, just, most opening day starts at any position for the Pirates.
So it is a position player then. If it's
it could be a pitcher. It's open to every spot on the field. So it may be a pitcher, maybe a position player.
Oh, that's tough. Yeah. I could probably name a few guys, but I don't have one guy that's standing out. Most of the guys I'm thinking of from this decade have at least moved around, aside from McCutchen, obviously. Started in center a lot, but then they moved him to right that one year even. He's probably my best guess, which is kind of cheap.
All right. That's it is a good guess. He was there for several years. I think he got traded to San Francisco, I think, right?
Yeah, so just before 2018.
Mm-hmm. All right. Is that your guess?
Yeah, I don't have a better one. I'm sure that's not right, or you wouldn't have asked. It's got to be sneakier than that.
All right, Joey is going with McCutcheon. If you have guesses, feel free to tweet them at me. It's at Boxseed Banter on Twitter, also at Boxseed Banter on Instagram. Yeah, tweet those guesses at me. You guys got all week to think about them, and we'll reveal the answer on the show next week. Now, the Pirates in this past quarter century, they were owned by Kevin McClatchy from 96 to 07. He was the youngest owner in baseball, just 33 when he got the team in 96. And he immediately slashed payroll. They got, I think they traded players away and in 97, their payroll was, Joe, if I gave you an over-under on $15 million payroll for the entire team, would you take the over or the under?
Yeah, I mean, inflation's a thing. I'm sure it's under now that you're asking, though.
$9 million
Wow,
for
single
payroll.
digit.
Yeah, that's 25 guys paying $9 million. Nowadays, you're lucky to sign one guy for $9 million.
Definitely.
Then he sold the team in 2000 to Robert Nutting, and Nutting has been the owner since 2007. Now, did you have anything on the owners? Do you have any other other than McClatchy slashing payroll that in that first year?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of their history. And I think we'll get more to Robert Nutting and his history in the final thoughts section. But maybe a slightly lesser known thing, sort of a sad fact for Pirates fans everywhere. I'll ask you this in the form of a question, actually. What well-known franchise owner from a different sport almost purchased them when McClatchy was looking to sell?
I mean, I don't know if this guy was interested in buying a team this far back in 07. But one name that comes to mind is Mark Cuban. I know he's dabbled into, wanting to buy. I know he's in the mix to buy the Dodgers. And I mean, there's not a lot of other notable owners that I'm aware of. So yeah, I would just guess Mark Cuban.
Yeah, and that's correct. I think saying Pirates fans are sad is kind of a giveaway. Mark Cuban probably would have given fans a very different history for the last decade and a half.
Yeah, he is a very very positive owner. A lot of times especially now, we saw recently the turmoil between the players and the owners are do not necessarily have the best interest of the players, but Cuban, it definitely seems like he has the best interest of his players at mind. So yeah, that definitely what could have been.
Yeah, I mean, he's also a native of the area, and I think
Okay.
if you consider the fact that the Pirates are one of those 4 teams that are currently fighting off a grievance from the Players Association, I don't really think that's a position Mark Cuban would ever be in.
That's a good point. Then some of the GMs that the Pirates have had, Cam Bonifay from 93 to 01. So he was the GM when they had to slash payroll to that $9 million salary. Dave Littlefield from 01 to 07. Neil Harrington from 07 to 19. So he
Huntington.
was, yeah. Is that what I said?
I think you said Harrington.
Okay, Huntington. Neil Huntington. He orchestrated that team that won those 3 straight wild cards. But also, they've struggled to really develop players. And so now their GM is Ben Sherrington from 2019 to the present. Now let's see. I've got some to talk about their managers. I've got some a little tidbit about them. Let's see if you can identify the manager from the tidbit. So they had a manager. He was had a very prolific managerial career. And then after his managerial career, he became a scout. Any idea on who that might be?
Famous scout.
Well, I think he's famous more for being a manager. This one was tough because I wasted. He was also on the Marlins list of managers, and I wasted a very good tidbit on him last week.
I was gonna say it was Rocco, but he's a Rays guy, right? I don't have a good guess.
Jimmy Leland.
Leland.
So he was a manager from 86 to 96. This next manager, as a player, homered in his first big league at bat. I think, you might really need some knowledge of Pirates, managerial personnel to get some of these guys.
Yeah, I don't know this one either. You're stumping me.
Gene Lamont.
Lamont, yeah.
Yeah. Now, this next manager is notorious for stealing first base in a heated argument with an umpire.
I feel like I should know, but two guys came to mind for being hot-headed. Clint Hurdle's an easy guess, but I'll go with Lloyd McClendon.
Lloyd McClendon is correct.
Okay.
He was the manager from 01 to 05. I also had another bit of trivia on him. I gave you the one that was probably more you can more associate with him. This other one goes back to his Little League days. He played in the Little League World Series in 1970. He earned the nickname Legendary Lloyd because he homered in 5 straight at-bats. And those were the only at-bats he got in the entire Little League World Series because he was intentionally walked every other time to the plate.
Wow, that's incredible. What a stat.
And this next manager, he in his big league career, he hit 3 home runs, and he also played in Japan for a couple of years.
Played in Japan.
Yeah.
He's also said in the majors or just in the minors, maybe.
The home runs. The home runs were in the majors in Major League Baseball. He had 3 in his career. He's also managed in the National League West for a couple teams, I believe.
Is this Tracy?
Yes, Jim Tracy, 06-07. And their next manager caught Nolan Ryan's 6th no-hitter with the Rangers.
I don't know him.
That's John Russell from 08 to 2010. Their next manager received a scholarship from Miami to play baseball and quarterback. He was also accepted into Harvard. However, he didn't choose any of those options. He instead got drafted out of high school and went the pro baseball route instead.
That's tough. I thought we were coming up on Clint Hurdle, but that doesn't sound like him to me. Is there another guy in between there?
There's not.
Wow.
It is Clint Hurdle, yes. I was shocked to realize, too, that he got accepted into Harvard. And their current manager was the longest tenured hitting coach in Tampa Bay history with 7 seasons under Joe Madden. Hitting coaches tend to be, have fairly short lifespans, but this guy was 7 seasons as the Tampa Bay hitting coach.
Yeah, Shelton. Yeah,
Derek
we haven't seen him yet, right? He's
correct. He's one of those guys waiting to get a crack at it. So yeah, those are the managers. Joe, do you have any kind of thoughts or anything on the managers? Anybody stand out? I know, you mentioned Lloyd McClendon and that, the famous temper of his back then. Anything else stick out about any of these guys?
No, Hurdle's the most well-known face, not just because of the recency bias, but the success they had and the longevity they had.
Yeah.
And the other, like, Leland's more famous for his time like with the Tigers, and Tracy, I more remember him. He had some role with the Dodgers, right?
Yeah, he was a manager of the Dodgers, and I want to say he managed the Rockies as well.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, Jimmy Leland, I know. He was the manager of those division winning teams back 91, 2 and 3. But that's going way back, and he was just kind of on the border here in this run. So yeah, that's the managers of the Pirates. Now it's time to talk about the roster that I've assembled for the Pirates. Now, quick reminder of the rules of forming the roster. Go back 25 years. Pick one player per year, cannot repeat players, and have to form a coherent roster. So starting off at catcher, we've got Jason Kendall from 1998. Great year from Kendall behind the dish, 5.6 wins. Not a lot of power, just 12 home runs, but he hit 327 on base at clip of 411. Not a lot of slugging, just 473. But strikeout to walk ratio of 1-to-1. Walked 51 times, struck out 51 times. And my favorite line on his stat, and this is what I would expect out of a Torrance starter, led the league with 31 hit by pitches.
Just leaning over the plate.
Solid year from Kendall behind the dish. At first base, got Kevin Young in 99. He hit 26 home runs, drove in over 106 RBIs, hit almost 300, just a hair under 300. At second base, got a switch hitter, Neil Walker from 2014. He was worth 3.6 wins. Hit 23 bombs. He was a Silver Slugger that year. Moving over to the hot corner at third base, we've got Aramis Ramirez in 01. He hit 34 home runs, drove in 112, hit 300, slugged 536. So a solid year from him. And finishing up on the infield at shortstop, we've got Kevin Newman from last year from 2019, worth 3.1 wins. He actually had some versatility. He played mostly short, also a little bit of second, third, even left field. He swiped 16 bags, hit 12 home runs, and actually going back, circling back to Kendall and Kevin Young, you don't usually see a lot of speed out of your catcher and first baseman, but Kendall stole 26 bags and Kevin Young stole 22. Then as we head to the outfield, Jason Bay in 05, 32 home runs, 101 RBIs, triple slash line of over 345 as he hit 306, got on base at a 402 clip and slugged 559. Kind of a liability with the gloves as he had negative defensive rankings. He was an all-star that year. And then as we get to center field, we've got Andrew McCutchen from 2013, worth almost 8 wins, 21 home runs, stole 27 bags. He also had a triple slash of 345 as he hit 317, on base of 404, and slugged 508. And he was an all-star, Silver Slugger, and the MVP back in 2013. Joe, you have anything you want to share on McCutchen?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. He was everything for this team, not just in 2013. One of the great facts about McCutchen was that he had actually watched the Pirates as a kid in their spring training facility and had actually said he wanted to be drafted by the Pirates, which during that time period, they were deep into their run of losing seasons. They were not a popular ball club. So for them to get a guy like this that has that quality of character and quality of play was a steal for this team.
Yeah, he was dynamic player, 5-tool player. And yeah, he in 2013, as you said, that long stretch of futility. 2013, I believe, was the stretch where they finally ended it. They had, I think it was 20 consecutive losing seasons, which is like the longest streak of that such in North American sports history. So yeah, and one of the lasting images I have of McCutchen is that time when he took his batting gloves. I think he gave them to a couple kids that were sitting out in the bleachers, and they just, the joy on their faces. You know,
I remember that too.
yeah, those kids are going to be talking about that for the rest of their lives,
Yeah.
and you know they're going to be McCutcheon fans the rest of their lives.
Not Pirates fans. That's the sadness of it.
But yeah, so they yeah, great representative of the team, and it was he was a huge part of that turnaround and that run that they had there.
Sorry to cut in to add, since you brought up the 20-year run. I think it's noteworthy you can draw a direct line from the time when they allowed Barry Bonds to leave the team in the early 90s directly to McCutcheon's heyday here.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Tells you everything you need to know about that 20-year span, I think.
Then as we move along to right field, we've got Brian Giles from 2000. He was worth 6.4 wins, hit 35 bombs, 123 RBIs, hit 315, 432, 594. So huge numbers from the all-star Brian Giles. You know, Giles had some great years in that stretch. You kind of forget about him. But yeah, monster year from Brian Giles. Then as we head to the bench, we've got Garrett Jones from 2009. He hit 21 home runs, only 44 RBI. I don't know, was he the leadoff hitter that year maybe? Because that's not many RBIs for hitting 21 bombs. Then Pedro Alvarez from 2012 hit 30 home runs. He drove in 85. So those are our bench infielders.
Since you mentioned those two guys in a row, I didn't fact check this one ahead of time, but I believe I saw during my research this confirmed. Garrett Jones and Pedro Alvarez are the two guys that have hit the ball into the water there at PNC. I think they're the only two guys.
Wow. Impressive. It is fun, those stadiums. So I know PNC, what do they call in the phone booth these days up in San Francisco? It's on its like fifth or sixth name. That stadium, you know, you can hit it into McCovey's Cove, and is the water reachable in Cincinnati?
I don't know offhand.
Yeah, and then obviously you've got the man-made body of water in Arizona, the pool. So it is fun when you can get those splash hits. Then in the outfield bench, we've got Orlando Merced, switch hitter from 95. He was worth 3.6 wins, hit 300, 29 doubles, 15 home runs, decent year from him. And then Starling Marte from 2016. He was worth 4.8 wins. Not a lot of patience from him. Only 23 walks, 104 strikeouts. Yikes. But he was good with the glove, worth over a win with the glove. He did hit 311, 9 home runs, 34 doubles for him. And the backup catcher, switch hitter Ryan Dumit from 08, hit 318, 357, 501 slugging. So a nice little catching duo between Kendall and Dumit that year. Between those 2 years that we got those guys. Then moving along to the rotation, we've got Denny Nagel from 96. He went 16-9 with an ERA of 3.5. You know, he was a workhorse, over 220 innings that year for them. Kip Wells in 03, he was worth 5 wins. He only went 10-9, but his ERA was 3.28, just a shade under 200 innings. Then we've got Oliver Perez in 04. Yes, Oliver Perez used to be a starter. Joey, he had a phenomenal year in 04.
Yeah, I was surprised to see it.
Yeah, ERA under 3, almost got to 200 innings, struck out 239, which was 11 strikeouts per 9, led the league. Wow. Just like you. Yeah, I was as shocked as you were to see those numbers out of Oliver Perez.
In 2004, no less.
Yeah. And is he still kicking around?
I haven't seen him recently, but he had a long run.
Yeah, so
we'll have to fact check that later.
I think he is. He's with Cleveland. I know he pitched for them last year. So I don't know if he's on the roster this year. Then moving along, we've got Garrett Cole in 2015. He was worth 4.5 wins that year. He went 19-8 with a 2.6 ERA. He struck out 202 in 208 innings, which, those are great numbers, nothing to scoff at. But, that's not the Gerrit Cole we've come to expect, who signed this huge deal with the Yankees, is he?
Certainly not. I was trying to save my rant for the final thoughts, but I'm sure most Pirates fans look back on what could have been with a lot of grief.
Yeah, I mean, he was number 1 overall pick out of UCLA. But yeah, he was good. It was good, not great for the Pirates, and he's really blossomed, like you said. We probably can touch on that more later. And then rounding out the rotation, Jameson Taillon in 2018. He was worth 4.6. He went 14-10 with a 3.2 ERA. He had 2 complete games and 1 shutout, and guess what? Both of those led the league.
Yeah,
wow,
that's huge nowadays. Huge.
Yeah, so it's a solid year out of him. I know he's battled injuries that have kind of kept him from being reaching his potential and being really consistent. But he is a guy who, if he is healthy, he can be very good for them. Then moving along to the pen in 97, in that 97 team that was stripped down to a $9 million payroll, we've got Rich Losell. He had 29 saves for them, ERA of around 3. 72 games through about 72 2/3 innings. Now, Joey, that 97 team, I want to kind of touch on that a little bit here as we're on Losell from 97. I know I mentioned that their payroll was slashed to $9 million. They were people were expecting them to break all kinds of records and not the ones that you'd be proud of breaking. They thought these guys were going to lose more games than anybody had ever lost, but that was not the case. This was probably prior to your following the Pirates, is it not?
Mostly, yeah.
So 97, they had a losing season. We know that since this was in their stretch of the 20 straight losing seasons. However, they finished second in the NL Central, just 5 games behind the division-winning Astros, and they actually almost they had a shot at winning the division. They had 3 games against the Astros to finish off the season, and the Cardinals. Whoever it was, they were down, I think, 3.5 games, and they had that 3-game series, but then they the other team, let's see, the other it was the Astros. The Astros won that game to then go up 4 games with 3 games remaining, and ending the season essentially. But yeah, the Pirates, they went 79-83 when people were expecting them to lose 110 games. So quite an impressive feat with that payroll. There's just a bunch of guys who were scrappy and just gave it their all every night. And I think that kind of gets overlooked because people just talk about that stretch of futility. They also had a impressive game I want to touch on here. They had a combined no-hitter. Francisco Cordova, I think, went 9 no-hit innings, but the Pirates did not score at all. I think it was against the Cardinals. And then they hit a pinch hit walk-off home run in the bottom of the 10th to win the game and finish off the no-hitter. So fun year in 97. Now as we move along, lefty Scott Sauerbeck from 02, ERA of 2.3. So a solid year. He had 70 strikeouts in 62 2/3 innings. Mike Gonzalez, a righty from 06, worth 2.2 wins, ERA of 2.17. 10.7 strikeouts per 9. So those 2 guys, Sauerbeck and Gonzalez, they could, get you the strikeout when you needed it. at Caps in '07. ERA of under 2.3. He had 18 saves. Gonzalez, by the way, had 24 saves. 79 innings for Caps. Evan Meek in 2010, ERA of 2.14. So these ERAs for the relievers are getting smaller and smaller. I know, ERA is not necessarily the best measure for relievers. But, yeah, solid year from Evan Meek. 80 innings. So he gave you a lot of innings out of the pen. Then Joel Hanrahan in 2011, ERA of 1.83, saved 40 games for the Bucks. ERA plus of 2.03, and finishing up the bullpen, we got lefty Felipe Vasquez in 2017, ERA of 1.67, 21 saves, ERA plus of 2.56. And I think that's all we should talk about. We shouldn't talk anymore about Felipe Vasquez. Any other relievers or pitchers that you want to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, to start with the pen, you put together an impressive pen. I like to look at ERA plus, which sort of scales them against the league that year, and park factors. And this is an impressive group that was often like 100% better than the league average reliever. These were very good guys in those pens. And it's something the Pirates teams were known for during that time. If nothing else, they could develop or pull a guy off the scrap heap and turn him into something, and then sadly trade him away to, the Yankees or someone else.
Yeah, it's and that's no small feat. A lot of team bullpens is often a weakness of teams. So yeah, it is impressive that they have all these arms, at the ready. And yeah, I think that's definitely one of an impressive thing about this roster.
One other fun fact about the pen here. I'll ask it as trivia. Let me make sure I've got the names up to make sure I don't switch them. Joel Hanrahan, he was one of the well-known guys in those pens. He was traded after 2012, and there are two other notable Pirate pitchers that are involved. One came back in the trade, and then another took over his role as closer. Either of those guys? I don't believe either is. Yeah, neither is on your roster. There's your hint.
I'm trying to think of who's been it was a starter who came back.
No, I'm talking about relievers.
Okay.
It was a multiplayer trade, but
was one of them was what's his I could see his face, and he I think that the Giants had him.
Yeah, you're getting there.
Shoot, what's his name?
You're thinking of Mark Melancon.
No, it's yeah. I had it.
I don't think you did.
No, I did. I was getting there. Yeah, Mark Melancon. The other one, I don't know.
The other one is Jason Grilli, who took over for him that year.
Okay.
And it kind of been one of those, I guess we'll call him a reclamation project. I don't know if he was that far along, but he did kind of come out of nowhere to have a decent end to 2012 and a really great 2013.
Okay. And then obviously, though, we got to take McCutchen in 2013.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, that's the Pirates roster that I have assembled. So, all you fans out there, if you want to tear this roster apart, let me have it. You want to create a better one, you can go to boxseatbanter.com. There's a link there to download the template off of a Google spreadsheet, and you can then fill that in and create your own roster. We'd love to see those. So yeah, you can do that, submit it, send it to me on the Twitter at boxseatbanter, or on the Instagram at boxseatbanter. Now, Joey, you made a Pirates roster yourself, correct?
Yeah, this was a stressful endeavor, I would say.
Now, I think we had a lot of similarities, but there were a few differences as well. Why don't you share some of those with our listeners? What were the similarities? What were the differences?
Yeah, first, I wasn't able to get Kevin Young on my roster. You got his good 99 year at first base there. for a number of reasons, I wasn't able to fit him in, which is a shame because he was one of the few bright spots on those late '90s teams. So that hurts a lot. Um, some other differences. I have Freddie Sanchez. I have his 2006 season. I could see why you talked yourself out of that. I think between Freddie Sanchez and the bench guys that I'll get to, though, the position flexibility was huge for me. He had played a lot of second and short and third during his few good years there. Our outfields are pretty similar. On the bench, as I alluded to, I used Josh Harrison in 2017 and Jack Wilson in 2009. Especially, Harrison's year was really huge, and again, could play second and third really well, maybe short in a pinch. And Jack Wilson was one of the, great shortstop defenders of his time. Not a lot of bat, of course, but really fun to watch on the field. Really known for his craft in the field. And then the last two spots, I have Brian Reynolds on my bench in the outfield for 19. Many fans will know Brian Reynolds is one of the guys they got back in the McCutchen trade. And he had a great season by a handful of measures. If you like looking at wins, he's worth about 4 wins, just to throw one stat out there. But he's, one of those guys that we have to look forward to in the future. So it's fun to get him on the roster somewhere. And then the backup catcher, I fit Russell Martin in 2014, which came at a great time for this club. They were in the middle of, they had been to the wild card in the NLDS the year prior. Martin was huge for them in 2014. It was really just a clubhouse guy and really helped that young pitching staff get through those big games. Pitching side, a lot of similarities. Our bullpens are a little different. I included Jason Grilli, who I mentioned mostly for name recognition. I thought one big miss that I reacted to very, I was very animated. You guys can't see how I'm reacting, but in the '97 season, I couldn't believe you didn't take Francisco Cordova. He had a great year, and he was even part of your fun fact from that year. He was the starter of that combined no-hitter. And again, at a time when there were few bright spots on the roster. But you've always got to juggle guys around with these kind of, they're tough decisions, but he was one of the few guys I think had the name recognition and was well known to everybody. I couldn't leave him off.
Yeah, no, you definitely touched on some guys who I struggled with in terms of, decisions that I had to make. It's always tough. We touch on it every week. Yeah, Freddie Sanchez was a guy, and that year in 2006, he was the batting champ. I think he hit like 344 or something.
Yeah.
He had a bunch of doubles too. I think he played. You did touch on his position versatility. He played a lot of second. But that year, I believe he was their third baseman. I'm not sure how much second he played that year. Maybe he played a bunch, but not a lot.
I forget the years, but in some of his good years, he split time between short and second. So
yeah,
I took the liberty of slotting him where I wanted.
Yeah, he not a lot of pop though, and not much on base from him. So that's that's why I couldn't squeeze him on. And I went with so in 2006 I took I got a solid year out of the pen from Mike Gonzalez. He's striking out over almost 11 guys per 9 innings. Russell Martin, it was tough to not get him on the roster. But then without a second baseman, I didn't really have any. So I had to take Neil Walker in 2014. But yeah, Russell Martin, as you mentioned, great year in 2014. And yeah, you mentioned that wild card, that team in 2014 that won the wild card. And Martin, he was, he's just been a winner his whole career, from the Dodgers in like 2008 and 2009. They went to the NLCS a couple times. He goes to New York with the Yankees. I think they went to the playoffs. Then he went to the Pirates. It was with the playoffs and them. He goes to Toronto. He goes to the playoffs with Toronto. And then he comes back to the Dodgers, and that team was stacked. They probably didn't go to the playoffs because of Russell Martin. But again, another playoff team. So yeah, he's won everywhere where he's been. So yeah, it was tough to not get him on the roster as well. And then another guy that we haven't mentioned yet, Nathan Clouth. You know, he was a fairly dynamic offensive player. Um, you know, he had some power, had some speed. Um, so solid year in '08, but I don't know, his defensive numbers were pretty bad in '08, and that brought his overall value down. Um, so yeah, those were the ones that I was really struggling with. Um, the pitching staff, I know you mentioned Franchi Cordova. I considered him in '97, but yeah, I felt like the other guys in the rotation were strong enough without him, and I went with a big year out of the pen.
Yeah, I think to summarize, you couldn't swap just one of these guys for the guys I picked. You would have had to have made 5 or 6 moves, and it was mostly you have a much better bullpen and like one different starter. And I went for more position flexibility in the infield.
Yeah, so yeah, it is a fun, puzzle that you kind of got to fit all the pieces in. So, listeners, I challenge you guys, whether it's the Pirates, your favorite team, or you feel a team just has a lot of fun players that you want to do, go ahead and make a roster and share with us. We would love to see that.
I don't know how you made your roster, but I know for me, I tend to get about 3/4 through, and then I'm just stuck. And I'll try 5 or 6 guys, and then I feel like I'm in a maze, and I just hit the dead end, and I've got to back out those 5 or 6 guys.
Yeah, usually I kind of go
Fun
through.
process.
I go through and like the kind of slam dunks. I fill those in. If a player had like one huge year, then you take that. If a player had multiple big years, you kind of will take the one that you need to fill in. And yeah. So it's a fun little project, and I encourage all you guys to try it as well. Now we've got one of our newer segments. We debuted it last week, our Q&A section, where our listeners can submit questions on the team that we'll get to. So our first question comes from Joe Wolf. He asked, what happened to the great outfield they had in the late aughts with McCutchen, Jason Bay, and Xavier Nady? That was a dynamic outfield that just never went anywhere, though all 3 of those guys had solid years. Now, Joe is partially correct, partially I think is a little bit incorrect. All 3 of those guys did play in the outfield for the Pirates. Bay and Nady played together. I think McCutchen came along after them. But yeah, Joe, do you have any thoughts on those guys in the outfield for the Pirates and why they never really, put anything together? Because like you mentioned, they were all 3 very good players.
Yeah. My first reaction was great outfield was a little of a stretch. But I think they had great potential is probably what he was getting at. A couple things that come to mind. I believe Nady went to the Yankees. He was just another of the casualties of ownership, the cheapness of ownership.
And he's a guy that we haven't mentioned yet on the show. He's a guy that you could argue could have made the roster at some point.
Yeah, I mean, he was a familiar name. I didn't feel he had any great full season to put together. I recall he had some elbow trouble that, there's no DH. He couldn't play the outfield for a little while there in his career. I'm not sure of the timing of that, but and Jason Bay was not a good defender. I think you mentioned that earlier in the show. He had the bat for a few years there and very predictably also went to the AL East, ended up on the Sox.
Yeah, he was part of that Manny Ramirez to the Dodgers trade. It was a 3-team trade.
I forgot about that.
I think it was LaRoche went from the Dodgers to the Pirates, I think, and Bay went from the Pirates to the Red Sox, and Manny went from Boston to L.A.
Was this Andy LaRoche?
I believe so.
Or Adam?
I don't know, one of them.
I want to say it was Andy Adam was more of a first baseman. Andy was more of like
the third baseman. Third baseman, I think.
Third, okay.
And so, but yeah, Jason Bay, he was really good there for a stretch, and then he just kind of fell off though, kind of out of nowhere.
Wow. I, I think if you look at the stats and his aging curve, I think it was somewhat predictable. But at the time, yeah, it was probably a surprise to a lot of people.
Yeah, but one thing I would like to touch on, since Joe, asked kind of what happened with I think part of it is when you have, most of your talent in the outfield, uh, obviously everyone gets to bat, an equal amount, but they have a less of an impact defensively, than guys closer to the ball, your catchers, your middle infielders, that kind of thing. So guys so distant from the action, they don't really have the impact defensively on a team. So I really look at teams that are strong. They say be strong up the middle, and also I would take a strong infield over a strong outfield, and I think that was kind of what the Pirates fell victim to there.
I agree, and well, you hit them both, but too many people say be strong up the middle. Be strong close to the ball is the better saying. In particular, because the flexibility it gives you. If a third baseman starts to get hurt, he has at least one spot he can move, to first.
Right.
And all those guys can maybe go to the corner outfielder. But, when a guy's hurt in the outfield or isn't chasing the ball down well anymore, it's hard to do anything with him, especially in the National League.
Yeah, great point. Our next question comes from Chris Kirk. He says, it seems like they are the A's of the National League where they cannot catch a break. What are your thoughts on that? And he's, of course, referring to those 3 straight years, 2013, 14, and 15. They were, they had great years. Look at their win totals, but they were, the wild card in each of those. In 2013, they won the wild card game, but then they lost in 5 games to the Cardinals. Then in 2014 and 2015, they lost the wild card game to dominant pitching performances both years. They lost to Bumgarner in 2014, and they lost to Jake Arrieta in 2015. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of bad luck there. What are your thoughts on those 3 years?
I have lots of one-liners. Yeah, it's not fair, but nothing's fair. And there's a lot of randomness in the game of baseball. And, that's tough to go up against aces like that. That was Arrieta's best year. It was one of the greatest years, frankly, that we've had in recent history. And Bumgarner, I don't even recall his season, but that playoff run was epic and very infamous at this point. And that's how it works. I think, my final quip would be, it's just punishment. If you're not going to win the division, that's what you have to do. You have to win that one game. It's do or die. That's your punishment. And also the Pirates got to play at home all 3 of those, and they only won 1 of the 3. So it's tough. It's tough to lose at home. It's tough to lose to 2 aces, but you got to win the division if you want a slugging chance. Otherwise, yeah, there's a lot of randomness involved.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, in that 2015, that Central Division was tough. The Mets won the East. They went 90-72. They actually had the fewest wins out of any National League playoff team, and they won the pennant that year. Dodgers won the West at 92-70. In the Central, you've got the Cards won the division. They went 162. Pittsburgh was 2 games behind them at 98-64. Then the Cubs were 97-65. So you've got, the second and third best teams in the league having to play a 1-game playoff for the right to play the Cards. That's tough.
It is tough. And there's a lot of nostalgia around the current alignment of divisions, but that's one of the most frustrating parts, is to see the disparity in strength of schedule and this disparity in outcomes.
Yeah. So yeah, it was definitely a tough break for the Pirates there, especially after, finally breaking through and getting into the playoffs. They had a great 3-year run there, and then now they've been struggling again. Now we've got a question from Chris Heilman. He asked, why is the team from a landlocked city named the Pirates? Are they River Pirates? Joey, do you have any insight on why they're called the Pirates? Because I have a bit of knowledge on that, but I'm going to throw that to you and see if you know first.
Yeah, I just know bits and pieces of the story. This goes back to the 1800s, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
They they quote unquote stole a player from another team or claimed him or something like that. That's that's the partial story that I know.
That is correct. So it was they got highly regarded second baseman Lou Beierbauer from the American Association's Philadelphia A's. And the signing, as you mentioned, he was like stolen from them. So because of that, it was, huge headlines, and it was called, piratical, and they, that Pittsburgh baseball team, they basically, wore it as a badge of honor, and they rolled with it, and they're like, yeah, we stole, we're the Pirates, let's go. And the name stuck. They've been the Pirates ever since. So yeah, it is fun to kind of see sometimes how the origin of these names. So yeah, good question there, and
That's a good one.
an interesting answer. Our final question comes from Randy Keon. I know last week he kind of went after the Marlins owners. Now he's really going after the Pittsburgh players. Will there be any players? Now this question was kind of already answered. But will there be any players on this team with a negative WAR since it's so bad? Now, fortunately, we had solid years from all the players. Some were good, not great, but it is Randy's question does show, the struggles that the Pirates have had in the past quarter century.
Yeah, that's tough. How do you respond to that? I think no one's going to say that about one of the other franchises that's been great in the last 25 years. I I can't speak for Pirates fans everywhere, but that's painful to think about. That might even have been a risk. It's still a pretty decent roster, which we'll get to, but yeah, you just think of what might have been. You think about all the guys that have been shipped off to play elsewhere midway through their career, and yeah, it sucks.
Yeah. All right, and that's the Q&A. So again, make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. It's at Boxseat Banter, and we offer those questions every week before we record. So make sure you follow us, and you can get any questions in. And we look forward to hearing your questions and getting to them on the show. All right, it's time to grade the roster, and in the National League East. As we went through, we had a lot of bright spots. Now as the NL Central starting the Pirates, I'm not sure if that streak is continuing. So Joey, I'm gonna offer up to you. What do you think about my roster? How would you grade it if you were to give it a letter grade, and maybe the strengths and weaknesses of the roster?
Yeah, I mean, can it be a pass fail? Is that an option?
If that's how you want to go, I'll give it a letter grade. But yeah, however you want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, we've touched on a lot of the reasoning, but I would particularly say the infield is not strong enough on this roster. And the rotation has some good guys, but it's not like you don't have peak epic years from like otherworldly aces on this team. There's obviously some guys really holding up the lineup, great years from McCutchen and Giles, but it's hard for me to go above like a C or C minus for this roster, and I'm really tempted to go as low as D plus if I think too hard about certain positions. So maybe I'll just split the difference and say C minus.
Okay. And how would you compare my roster versus yours if you were to say they're going to play a 7-game series against each other?
7 games. I mean, I'm going to take mine for the positional flexibility and the fact that I have Russell Martin on the bench. But how much better is it? It's probably just a C instead of a C minus, if that. Thin margins here.
Okay, and as I grade the roster, yeah, I agree. They are weak offensively. When I compare it to all the other rosters that I rank, they are in the lower half of pretty much every category except for hit by pitch. As Jason Kendall had 31 of them. They were second overall, behind the Astros, which if we did this in another 25 years, the Astros will probably have an even larger lead in that category. But yeah, other than that, they were pretty much below average across the board. As you mentioned, the infield was not great. So I would say, yeah, that the strength of the position players is the outfield. Decent outfield. Um, a decent catching duo as well with Kendall and Dumet. Would have been stronger with Kendall and Russell Martin. And then, yeah, the rotation, not great. We kind of mentioned in the previous shows how, if you go back 25 years, you can pretty much put together a great rotation. We saw it with the Nationals. We saw it with the Braves. Even the Marlins had some good pitching years. The Phillies definitely. And the Mets, of course, with some of the recent guys. But yeah, it was tough to really get some great like ace years. These guys are all good pitchers, but I don't think we really have a true ace year out of any of them. But the bullpen, as we mentioned, the bullpen is very strong, very solid. So I do like the bullpen. But with everything that I've mentioned, I hate to do it, but I think I just have to give them an F overall. Actually,
It's brutal.
Yeah, if you compare it to a regular roster, this team has over 100 WAR. How do you think they would do against the Yankees or the Dodgers like in 2019, 2020?
Yeah, well, against just the 2019 Yankees roster.
Yeah.
I think this is a better team than that one, but this is obviously a collection of guys from 25 years.
Yeah. So
yeah, I only have like a handful of teams that I did rosters for also. I think you have the data for all 30 that you made.
Yeah.
So if you say they're an F, then I'm probably missing something.
Yeah, it is tough. I hate to do it, but I think that's what I'm going to do. I do have, I'll tease something special here. I've got something that I might be able to really compare these teams. So, stay with me and might reveal that in the near future. But yeah, I'm just going to tease my listeners with that right now. But yeah, that's how I'm going to grade the roster. Joey, you're a little more lenient than I am, so I appreciate that.
I think in hindsight, I'm thinking I won't name any teams, but I was thinking some other AL Central and NL Central teams would be pretty weak. But you've seen all 30, so.
Yep. All right, and that's grading the roster. All right, it's time to wrap it up here. And as we do, we will share our final thoughts on the Pirates and on the organization. So, Joey, why don't you share with us first your final thoughts on the Pirates?
I mean, it's hard to talk about this team without talking significantly about the tenure of Neil Huntington. He had a long reign there running the front office of this team. He was the GM, technically. But just this last offseason, they, of course, cleaned out their whole baseball ops department, which is very noteworthy considering the stability they've had there for the last decade plus for many of those guys. Some noteworthy things that we didn't touch on that I would bring up. Before this decade, the Pirates seemed to be one of the teams that were making a lot of like new ventures into new talents or new places to go. Some noteworthy things in 2008, they signed the first couple players from India.
Mm-hmm.
They had the first Lithuanian born and raised player in this decade, and the first African born player, Gift Ngope. Many people know him. He's semi-famous now. And they had signed some guys from Asia, including who was a fan favorite for his time, Jung Ho Kang, who we didn't touch on.
He was the guy. Yeah, he was the guy that we that missed the roster, but you could definitely make a case for him.
Yeah, and somewhere in there they built. I think around the time Nutting took over the team, they were building a new facility in the Dominican. They were active in the Latin market. This by all accounts seemed to be a team that was gonna, as they would say now, like revamp their system and use analytics and try new things, which is especially noteworthy for a team in Pittsburgh. One of the sad things I think that they were known for in some circles was that it was one of the reasons it said that Barry Bonds left was because the city seemed to favor the white players on the team, which I think is a sad black mark on the team. And I don't know how we verify that or view that with, you know, what's going on in the world today, but Barry Bonds couldn't get out of there fast enough. And they have a few other bright spots, but this was a team that just really they weren't really using their talents. They weren't really developing what they had. And I would say in a noteworthy thing, that's Neil Huntington was very good at like pulling the guys off the scrap heap, like we talked about. And they seemed to have a clear strategy, particularly with their pitchers. They were telling these guys to, you know, throw fastballs first, pitch to contact, throw the sinking two-seamer heavily. And that worked great for a time, especially at the beginning of this decade. But the problem was they seemed to forget that they were part of an ecosystem that had 29 other teams in it. And these other teams were constantly adapting to try to survive. Pirates did not adapt. They did not try to find new players with, you know, new skill sets. They did not try to use existing skill sets that those guys had. And you see that Gerrit Cole's the easy example. When he left to go to Houston, it was painful to see what he did. You know, give credit to the Astros for unlocking the rest of his talent or letting him do however you want to view it. But the Pirates couldn't do that. Another guy we didn't talk about was Charlie Morton. On the Pirates, he was, you know, barely noteworthy. Along with Ivan Nova, he was kind of just a pitch to contact guy. I mean, viewing it through the statistics, it seems like I think he's quoted at some point for saying he was convinced he couldn't strike guys out, that he just wasn't a strikeout pitcher. And he has the one off year in Philly and then goes to Houston. And, you know, this last couple of years, he's been great. And he's an excellent strikeout pitcher now. Particularly, he's laid off those sinking two-seamers more and more. He added a cutter and then started throwing his four-seamer a lot more. And just really stepped up his game to a new level. And guys, while with the Pirates club, never really made those moves. And another name we didn't mention was Ray Searage, the pitching coach during Huntington's tenure. He's very well known, and for a long time was considered like the guy. He was like the arm doctor or the guy you go to like figure out how to stay in the bigs. You know, he brought Francisco Liriano back from his mountain of injuries that he'd had and made him very good again. And a number of other guys, you know, but it turned out that was mostly based on those two or three principles I mentioned with the sinking fastballs. And they never really adapt or moved past that. So I think looking forward, I'm excited that they finally cleaned house. No ill will towards those previous guys, but I'd like to see what Ben Cherington can do. I know so far that he's brought in Oz Ocampo, who's a guy from the Houston org who worked in, I think their international ops department or international scouting or something. But he's brought in a few noteworthy names like that, and I'd like to see what he can do. Another thing I wanted to touch on really was the trades. Like those trades just kill. I don't think we've really beat the dead horse enough there. Obviously, every Pirates fan is sad that we lost Gerrit Cole. You know, another noteworthy one is the trade to get Chris Archer. They gave up Austin Meadows and Tyler Glasnow, and that hurts. And I don't think it's any mistake that those guys were all playing prominent roles in the playoffs last year, and now the front office and baseball ops department has been cleaned out. I think they looked at that and said those should have been our guys, and now they're gone. And of course, they lost their franchise icon in McCutchen, who should have been a lifetime Pirate. Right. I think that tells you everything you need to know about this franchise. So I'll end with that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely bringing up some great points. They've had a lot of talent, but probably not utilized correctly. And yeah, as you mentioned, we saw Gerrit Cole bloom elsewhere. You know, Chris Archer, people think, you know, he's got ace potential. He showed flashes in Tampa. Then when the Pirates acquired him, he took like some steps back. They didn't utilize him correctly. And so, yeah, I definitely agree with all those points that you brought up. I would like to say as I close that, after they had that great stretch, 91, 2-3, but after that weak throw home in 92, you know, as you mentioned, Bonds left town and they really just, that kind of changed their future. If he makes a good throw home and it was a Sid Bream, if he's out at the plate, what kind of alternate universe are we living in?
Probably one where Mark Cuban buys the team and McCutcheon's, going to the hall with the Pirates hat on.
Maybe, but yeah, so they've really they struggled there. As you mentioned, they had that brief run, but just the player development has been disappointing. And so and it's disappointing as a baseball fan to see, because they've got that beautiful ballpark, and we've seen just how electric it can be, when the team is good, and that in those wild card games, it was electric, and it's such a great sight for baseball. So my hope going forward is that, as you mentioned, is that since they've cleaned house, hopefully the new regime can straighten it out. They will be playing catch up, though, because so many teams are so far along in their in their player development systems. But hopefully they can correct some of the things that they've missed on, and correctly utilize and really get their most potential that they can, help their players reach their potential going forward. So that's what I hope to see out of Pittsburgh. And I hope that we can get to a game at PNC Park someday soon, and really see what everyone says. It's such a gem of a ballpark, and hopefully we can see a great product on the field of the Pittsburgh Pirates. So Joey, I want to thank you again for joining us. And again, what was that Twitter handle?
It's Sarcastic Baseball, but it's Sarcastic BASB1.
Okay, you can see him, check his takes there. My personal Twitter handle is at WBallis, and the podcast, it's at Boxseat Banter, both on Twitter and Instagram. So Joey, I appreciate having you on the show today. I've enjoyed it, so thank you for logging in and talking Pirates with us.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. Looking forward to hearing the next episode.
Yeah, and hopefully we can have you on the show again sometime down the line. It's been fun. Again, remember to visit the website, Boxseat Banter. You'll be able to check out the full roster and stats there. And we look forward to you sharing your thoughts with us on the Pirates roster. Send those in. This is Billy Ballas of Boxseat Banter, signing off.